Wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Much love and respect. Thanks for tuning in once again. We got a good video. We're going to continue learning about the people of Africa, their culture and origins, going outside of what they teach us in mainstream education in schools and universities. And we're doing it with real research, real anthropological work, real historical chronicles from the people themselves, their oral traditions, their progenitors, their ancestors. Breaking out of Africa theories and lies. Hope you guys enjoyed the video on the Shona people of Zimbabwe. We got another people today we're going to be talking about, the Hausa, the Kanem-Borno people, and all the people related to them. We're going to mention that today as well. And I'm going to show you that their origins was not in Africa, but in the areas they're calling the Middle East, Arabia, and other parts of Asia. Please watch the whole presentation and verify the sources. Don't practice cognitive dissonance and listen to the people themselves tell you who they are. I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. So let's get started. So again, today we're talking about the Hausa people and the Kanem-Borno people. They are related, all right? This is what they look like in general. As you guys can see, they have, the clothing is very Islamic, Muslim, even Turkish looking. As you guys can see, this is what we're going to be talking about today. Again, the Hausa and the Kanem-Borno Islamic Caliphate, Nigeria. Just Google Borno people and this is the images you get. As you guys can see, you'll see some Hausa images pop up, but in general you can see very Islamic, Muslim people in Nigeria. All right, and we're going to show you today their origin. Medieval Kanem-Borno, yeah, from the medieval times, just like the Shona we showed recently, right? History of the Kanem-Borno Empire. We're going to show what they say about their origins. So what does mainstream general info say about the Kanem-Borno Empire? They're saying here in Wikipedia, again, we're just using this as reference just to know what people Google, right? This is what people Google right away, right? The Kanem-Borno Empire existed in areas which are now part of the Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, Libya, and Chad. It was known to the Arabian geographers as the Kanem Empire from the 8th century AD onward and lasted as the independent kingdom of Borno, the Borno Empire, until 1900. The early history of the empire is mainly known from the Royal Chronicle, or Gurgan, discovered in 1851 by the German traveler Heinrich Barth. Remnant successor regimes of the empire in form of Borno Emirate and Dikwa Emirate were established around 1900, still exist as traditional states within Nigeria. Now, real quick, I'm going to go to the Gurgam here entry. It says Gurgam, or D1, is the Royal Chronicle of the Kanem-Borno Empire, written in Arabic. Gurgam is also used as the name for written historical records in some kingdoms west of Borno, including Dara, Fika, and Mandara, defined as chronicle or list of ancestors, or simply date their ancestors, okay? This is their official chronicles, guys. It's not a myth, it's not a legend. So this provides the names of 69 rulers of Kanem-Borno and some supplementary information concerning the length of their reigns, their ascendancy, and often some events of their reigns. The information given by several Arab authors, right, including these guys, Said Marid and Al-Kashandi, confirm the validity of the data provided in the Gurgam, literally saying, yes, they confirmed that these people came from Baghdad, Iraq. On the basis of these sources, a nearly accurate chronology of these sources, primary sources, of the rulers of Kanem-Borno can be established between the 10th and the 19th century. Okay, that's when they got there, these people from Baghdad. These people, large population of Nigeria, some in Cameroon as we read here, the Chad, Niger as well. So you can actually accurately see the chronology of these rulers of the Kanem-Borno, who are the same people as the Hausa They actually ended up in Kanem-Borno first before they moved on to the Hausa lands. It's the same people, and their chronicles are the same. I just wanted to point this out. That's what Wikipedia is telling us, right? If you want to know the history and origin of these people, you got to read the Gurgam or their chronicles, and it tells you. And this has been verified. This has been verified. It's not just a legend or a myth, guys. And this is what Wikipedia or general mainstream says about the Hausa. They're saying they are a native ethnic group in West Africa. They speak the Hausa language, which is the second most spoken language after Arabic and Afro-Asiatic language families. So they have populations in Benin, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Chad, Central African Republic, Togo, and Ghana. But not just in Nigeria. It says here the history. Dauda, or again, you guys are going to see Dauda is a queen who married the prince from Baghdad. And their children are a lot of the founders of the Kanem-Borno Hausa states. So it says Dauda in northern Nigeria is the oldest city of Hausa land. The Hausa of Gobir, also in northern Nigeria, speak the oldest surviving classical vernacular of the language. Now, right here it says in the 7th century that Dala Hill in Kano was the site of a Hausa community that migrated from Gaya and engaged in iron working. Iron Age people, just like the Shona Bantu, the Hausa Bakwa kingdoms were established around the 7th to 11th centuries. Well, that's a lot of years. Which one? Of these, the kingdom of Dara was the first, according to the Bayajidda legend. Okay, according to the legend. It's definitely not a legend. We're going to read the information. We're going to read the history of these chronicles so you guys can see. And it's actually the official story of the palace officials of the royal lines. They know their history. It's very ignorant of anyone to try to contradict what they know of their own ancestors. So just real quick, as we're going to get into it, guys, I want you to see the Bayajidda was, according to the legends surrounding most West African states, before the 19th century, the founder of the Hausa states. All right? The legends surrounding most West African states. More than just a legend, guys. It's the founder of the Hausa states. Most accounts say that Bayajidda came from Baghdad. Bayajidda came first to Borno, where he was given one of the Mai's daughters as wife, and then later lived for a while in Hausa land, where he married Queen Adara, who also gave him Wadi Mistress as a reward for slaying Sarki, said to be the great snake, which deprived her people of access to water. So we're going to read actually in one of these books today, guys, historical, that by snake, they meant the snake clan, a people. By the Queen of Dara, Bayajidda had a son called Bawo, all right? Another Bidam by the Borno princess, and yet another son, Karbagari, by his Gwari paramour. Bawo is said to have succeeded his father and had 6 sons who became the rulers of Dauda, Katsina, Sasso, Gobir, Kano, and Rano, all right? And these are places, but they were people, grandsons of Bayajidda from Baghdad, the Hausa states. These, together with Bayram, which was ruled by the son of Bayajidda and of the Borno princes, formed the Hausa Bakwe, or the Hausa 7. All right. So it goes on. I just want to show you. We're going to get into it more. I know we're reading Wikipedia now. We're just in the beginning. Then we got the Kano Chronicle. It says here the Kano Chronicle, an Arabic language manuscript that lists the rulers of Kano, Nigeria. See what they look like? They got mosque. Islam is big. Original people coming from the so-called Middle East. A lot of these people are descendants of original people coming from the Middle East. So this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. You see Hausa rulers, lineage of the Baghdad dynasty. You see Bawo, the son of the Baghdad prince, and so on and so on. So to say that these people are just making up things when it's all of them, all the royal lines of these states, the Kanem-Borno and Hausa states. It says the Kano Chronicles, a list of rulers of Kano stretching back to the 10th century AD. Middle Ages. It's not ancient. They just got there. It tells of 11 clans of enemies, such as salt-extracted brewers or smiths, who were warned by their spiritual leader that a stranger would come and cut down their sacred tree and wrest their dominion from them. A large tree. If he comes not in your time, surely he will come in the time of your children and will conquer all in his country. Indeed, a man named Baghdad arrived soon after conquered and became the first king of Kano according to the chronicle. So that's the Kano Chronicle and the Bayajidda, two of the main sources for the Hausa people and the Kanem-Borno Empire of Africa. Real quick, just gonna read this article right here, guys. It says here, towards a less orthodox history of Hausa land. This is from the Journal of African History, Volume 20, Number 2, 1979, by J. E. G. Sutton. So basically, right away, this article, this scholar's trying to basically emphasize why are they disregarding the Bayajidda legend of them being from Baghdad? Why are they only taking it as myth or legend? And he's going to say some things to point certain things out. He's going to show us again. As we read these historical books, a lot of these West African scholars and professors, right, they try to claim and assume that the Hausa people came from the Sahara, which goes against the whole Bayajidda legend and in the Kano Chronicles. So he's going to let you know, hey, this is more than a legend. And here's the facts. Now he says, define as that area where Hausa is the first language of most or all the population. Hausa land is enormously extensive. This observation holds good even if we exclude those districts such as Dauri in the west and Bauchi in the southeast, where effective Hausaization of both town and countryside has been occurring in recent centuries, and especially since the Sokoto Jihad, and also exclude the numerous districts in Nigeria and beyond where Hausa has long been employed as a lingua franca, or the main tongue. Such a vast geographical extent demands a historical explanation, and since sharing a language implies not just the ability to communicate but also some sense of identity, a powerful cultural movement has to be discerned. This cultural movement, the emergence and spread of Hausaness, so to speak, should, I shall argue below, be traced to the beginning of the present millennium, Middle Ages. The early history of the Hausa land is not dependent exclusively on such general linguistic and cultural considerations. They don't go off that. Together with some sporadic leads from the poorly developed yet developing fields of archaeology and place names. So again, they don't have no real archaeology, and they're not using the linguistics or the culture of the people to really research and understand their origins, is what he's saying. For Hausa land is blessed with some written sources of its own, but they got their own written history, right? Which, though their known versions are mostly no earlier than the 19th century, clearly incorporate earlier traditions. Beside chronicle materials of the Hausa kingdoms, of which the Kano Chronicle is the most informative. And there you go again, the Kano Chronicle, earlier traditions of the Hausa kingdoms. Is the most informative. That's their chronicle. These traditions also purport to explain, if not exactly, Hausa origins. The Kano Chronicle explains the Hausa origins, at least how a single people came to be organized from early times in this series of kingdoms, conventionally numbered as 7. The stories of the founding hero, Bayajidda, who traveled from the nearer or more distant east, Bornu, Kanem, or even Baghdad. So that's the route him and his people entered through Kanem-Borno first empire, and then they ended up in the Hausa lands. And who slew the snake that controlled the well of Daura? Again, we're going to read that was a clan, a people, and of his son Bawo, and further offspring who supposedly established the 7 original kingdoms, the Hausa Bagwai. And you gotta say supposedly, that's their legend, it's not supposedly to them. Are naturally treated as legendary by modern historians and by some as late inventions. You see, modern historians are treating this as a legend. But you guys got to understand, this is the chronicle of their royal officials. This is their origin story. They're more than a legend. This is their genealogy. I showed you guys earlier the table. That's their ancestry, their story. But again, modern historians are treating it as a legend because you got to understand why. That would rewrite history. Remember, everybody's supposed to be coming out of Africa, not out of Baghdad, not out of Middle East, right? Remember what Thomas Drew said, Black Asiatics. So they're treating it as a legend now. As again, it goes against their whole indoctrinated history of out of Africa theories. That's why it will rewrite history. This point has been made by M.G. Smith, among others, while Abdullahi Smith has gone further, not only in emphasizing the doubtful authenticity of this cycle of legend, but also in arguing that the origins of the Hausa kingdoms, the true seven and illegitimate ones alike, were anyway secondary developments among a people already long established as Hausa in their present territory. So, again, modern historians, they don't want to go with the chronicles, they don't want to believe the Hausa and the Borno people themselves. This interesting argument of Abdullahi Smith has proved very influential in recent studies of Hausa land and his question of false presumptions, including its long overdue exposure of the Hamitic element in Hausa historiography. All right, we're going to read. It seems that before the Hausa people coming from Baghdad, the Middle East were there. There was people there. Of course, the Pygmies were there. A lot of the Khoisans went through there. In ancient times, the cave paintings prove it. Remember, we learned about how they were expert at cave painting. A lot of beautiful art all over Africa as they migrated down. But also you have migrations, waves of other migrants coming in, which seem to have been Hamitic. This is before the actual Bayajidda, the Prince of Baghdad, that established himself there in the Middle Ages. Remember, that's recent, guys. That's Middle Ages when the Hausa established themselves, when they got there. So yeah, there is a Hamitic element if they mix with the local people that were already there. And of course, later on, people like the Fulani and the Tuareg and stuff like that. And they also mix with the Hausa people coming from Baghdad, Kanem-Borno people. Despite the fair range of sources and the recent acknowledgement of the importance of linguistics, as well as the suspicions expressed about the literal meaning of the Bayajidda and Bakwai legends, so many guys, different peoples have the same legend. The usual approach to Hausa history continues to start conceptually, if not explicitly, from the local traditions, from the local traditional and written accounts, aided by certain external ones such as Leo Africanus in the early 16th century. So this is what they try to use. They try to go outside of the actual people's legend or written accounts, chronology, chronicles, and they try to add the hijack, the Roman Greek stuff, historians. The accent, in other words, has remained on authorities, be they primary or secondary or somewhere in between. Especially notable the early 19th century writings of Sultan Muhammad Bello, the son and successor of the Shehu Usman Danfodio. Respect for authority and concern for orthodoxy do not merely help explain the reverence accorded to these great figures of the Sokoto Jihad, who did so much to shape the subsequent history of the vast part of Nigeria and adjacent countries. So they're talking about the Fulani people eventually took over the Hausa states and did kind of add their own little stories to it too. They are also prominent in the writings and recorded careers of the Shehu or Shehu and Bello themselves, with their frequent echoes of Islamic precedent and injunctions handed down through a line of scholars, which in a way stretches back to the life and precepts of the Prophet himself. I am not contending that the works of Bello in particular or the written sources for Hausa history in general are unimportant or have never been treated critically, and we should note how parts of the Kano Chronicle reveal a historical spirit independent of the ascendancy of Sokoto and the Fulani. So what he's saying here, guys, if you don't understand, is that in the Kano Chronicles, these people, the Sokoto and the Fulani, they're not in there because they came much later. So that's why they don't want to accept the Kano Chronicle. And they add in their history into the Hausa states when they took over in the 1800s, guys. You're going to read this. And that modern historiography builds on this. Yet the tradition of respect for what is established and repeated, whether in oral or especially literary form, remains dominant. So that fresh thinking and new scholarship leads not so much to a reconceptualization of Hausa history, but rather to a revised orthodoxy. So now he's going to mention something about why they should use linguistics too for an origin. It says, furthermore, the linguistic map demonstrates that the Hausa language, and presumably therefore the early communities who identified themselves as Hausa, did not originate, as some seem to assume, in the Sahara. So this is where they're trying to put them. They're trying to say, oh no, they just, came from the Sahara, the desert. That's where they originated, just like they're saying that Khoisan originated, everybody originated in the Sahara, right? Well, the Sahara leads into the Mediterranean, right? If anything. But look what he's going to say here. He's telling you straight up, they did not originate, as some seem to assume. This is the professors we're going to read a little bit of their books because they're the go-to guys. They're the ones saying, no, no, don't listen to the legends or the no chronicles or anything like that. That's just myth. And they're like, they came from the Sahara without no proof. Remember, they have little history. They don't know. That's an assumption and a conjecture, and that's misinforming you. He's telling you right here, they did not originate, as some seem to assume, in the Sahara, nor did they simply emerge long ago across the whole breadth of Greater Hausa land. They didn't just pop out of the ground. Rather, the Hausa homeland must be sought in the westernly part of the Chad Basin, most likely in what is now Eastern Hausa land or the Bornu Hausa borderland. So yes, they came from that way, guys. The east, not from the Sahara. The Bornu, Kanem-Borno Empire, that's their same people. They had actually, Bayajidda had settled there first, got a princess from there, had children, and then he went to the Hausa lands. He got with Dara, another princess there, had a descendant there too. Here again, precision should not be overpressed, but the relationship of Hausa to the Chadic languages as a whole allow no other reasonable hypothesis. For since Hausa belongs genetically as well as geographically to the western division of Chadic and is itself the most westerly language in that division, inevitably its ancestry has to be sought on or beyond its eastern side, beyond the east. Put simply, the history of Hausa land in the present millennium has been a westward push from the Hadeja, Daura, Kano region to that of Sokoto and beyond. They came from the east, okay, not north. There would have been two factors in this expansion, and at this stage it is difficult to assess their relative weights. One would have been the gradual westward movement and land clearance by generations of Hausa colonists. Colonists, not indigenous to Africa, colonists. A go west young man process. The other, the assimilation of previous settled populations with a variety of tongues into the Hausa system and identity, its culture, and its language, that is, Hausaization. All right, in a little map here, the Bornu area down here to the, what they're saying, east, and then the Hausa lands all around here towards the west. These remarks bring the discussion face to face with the central political historiography of Hausa land in its middle period. The 15th century is seen as a watershed. It is then, all right, 15th century, it is then significantly to the time of the rise of Songhai and of Oyo, of Bornu, and of Agadis, that the emergence of substantial city-states in eastern Hausa land, Kano, Katsina, and Sasso first becomes obvious, and that Hausa land clearly connects itself with the cultural and commercial network of the Sudan and the Sahara and its Islamicizing features. If it be objected that the rapidity of these developments is partly illusory owing to the better traditional and documentary sources for the 15th century, it can legitimately be replied that it was this new situation and enlargement of scale which generated the clearer and more voluminous sources, and especially a measure of literacy. Again, all this really culminated and happening, really, the kingdoms reaching their climax when 15th century, guys, not so long ago. They are not indigenous to this area. This is not ancient. This was the period then when Hausa land placed itself on the world map, as Hicksit has explained so clearly. Especially striking is the contrast between the mid-14th century when Ibn Battuta visited Tagada by Air with his copper mines but remained extremely vague on the region to the south. In fact, on the whole Savannah region between the Niger Bend and Bornu, and the early 16th century account of Leo Africanos, albeit unreliable and second-hand, all right? Leo Africanus is unreliable and second-hand, not primary. The Kano chronicles, the Bayajidda legend is primary, describing 6 Hausa kingdoms or regions, most of which are readily identifiable. Therefore, the celebrated passage in the Kano Chronicle indicating a mid-15th century effervescence marked by new cultural, commercial, and political developments and external contexts in all 4 directions, though doubtless impressionistic, is not mere invention. All right, it's not a legend. He's telling you where we are, guys. You remember what we're reading, right? We're reading the Journal of African History. Again, it's not an invention, all right? The roots of Hausa society go back further than this, of course, but it may be arguable that it was this middle period, with its increase in tempo, any degree of cultural and commercial incorporation into a wider world that helped Hausaness to crystallize as a dominant cultural and linguistic entity, and not to develop into a series of separate tribes. And guys, in the same article, a little bit ahead, I just want to show you before I leave. He writes about the orthodox view of an ancient northern origin, them coming from the Sahara. It had nothing to do with Baghdad or actually following the people's chronicles, their primary sources, their legends. This is going against what they're saying. So this is modern scholars. And he's telling you they take their lead largely from the present environmental and ethnographic situation and share the common shortcomings of these sorts of evidence when attempting to project them into the past, especially when lacking detailed archaeological support. You guys got to understand, they're making it all up. He gets really deep with it, and he got the sources to prove it. All right, he got footnotes after footnotes, but I just wanted to go ahead and read that to you. This is just an article letting you know that the actual primary sources and the actual legends and chronicles of the Hausa and Kanem-Borno people are disregarded by modern day historians. They make up their own origin stories, which they have no proof of. Basically, they're not listening to the people themselves. They're not listening to the people themselves. That's why it's a less orthodox history. Again, because it doesn't go with the orthodox mainstream lies. Get it? Real quick, we go to this source right here. The book is called Africa, Its Peoples and Their Culture History by George Peter Murdoch, professor of anthropology at Yale University. This guy's quoted a lot in different sources. Real quick, just want to show what it says here. Now, this guy tries to make like all the Hausa and a lot of the Sudan people into Hamites only, very generalized. But he does mention something here of where their in-depth historical origin is written, all right? It says here, all the peoples of this province speak languages of the Hausa branch of the Chadic subfamily of the Hamitic stock. Are they really Hamitic? Maybe. As indicated in chapter 16, at least some of them appear to have come from the north. At least, so that's what he's calling Hamitic, anybody coming from the north, where they once occupied the central portion of Sahara, whence they were driven by the Berbers under Arab pressure. The Chadic people have long inhabited Sudan. However, it is indicated by the presence of other branches of the subfamily, not only in the Bornu and Bagirmi provinces. So remember, Kanem-Borno and the Hausa are related historically, but also in the Nigerian plateau area. Though never politically unified until their conquest by the Fulani in the 19th century, the Hausa peoples, probably as a result of long experience in the trans-Saharan caravan trade, have achieved a degree of cultural unity comparable to that of the great nations of Europe in modern times, and are perhaps the only nation of Negro Africa where this can definitely be said to have happened prior to European colonial occupation. They are likewise literate. Long ago, they adopted the Arabic alphabet for writing their own language, and have since produced an extensive literature, especially of historical character. So pay attention what it said here. Extensive literature they have, especially of historical character, the famous Kano Chronicle. All right? That's their historical account of their origin. We're talking about the Bornu and the Hausa peoples, for example, gives us unusual historic depth. Unusual, right? Because it's giving them an origin in Asia, not in Africa. That's why he's saying unusual. That for this part of the Sudan. Although the events recorded before the 14th century deal mainly with wars among the various Hausa states, all right? So the Kano Chronicle, all right? We got this historic book here used by many scholars. He's telling you, if you really want to know and read extensive literature on the history of the Hausa and Borno people, then check out the Kano Chronicle, all right? We're going to get into that. So this book has a lot of info. You guys want to check it out. But we're talking about the origin of these people, and this is what he has. For anything ancient or dealing with the origin of these people is the Kano Chronicle, which he stated right here, all right? And you can't practice cognitive dissonance when we're reading that. It's going to tell you where these people are coming from. Moving on to this source, the book is called An Introduction to the History of West Africa by J.D. Fage, formerly professor of history in the University College of Ghana. On page 5 it says here, we know very little about the history or the manner of life of the West African Negroes before the intruders from North Africa had come into contact with them and so to influence them and their ways. Again, they're telling you they don't really know much before the Middle Ages, before these so-called kingdoms started forming, these so-called Muslims and Arabs started invading, right, from North Africa, supposedly, right? But we're going to see where they were really coming from. So again, I just want to point this out. Very little is known of the history and the manner of the West African Negroes before the Middle Ages. The Negro peoples did not keep written records, and there are limits to the value of their oral traditions, although the major political groups have often preserved their traditions in remarkable accuracy for 400 years or even longer. The further back these traditions extend, the more condensed they become and the more difficult they are to interpret. On the other hand, the time sense of some of the less politically organized peoples is often limited to a span of a few generations. A more general limitation is that oral traditions are primarily chronicles of political events, lists of chiefs, accounts of wars and migrations. They do not directly inform us of the manner of life of the people concerned. All right, so he's saying, yeah, these chronicles tell us their origin and their history, but it doesn't tell us how they were living, their way of life and stuff like that. For information of this kind, the historian must depend chiefly on the evidence supported by archaeology or on the accounts written by alien peoples before the 15th century from North Africa, thereafter from Europe as well, when they first made contact with the Negroes. So dodge the hijack. So again, he's saying you want to really get to know them, how they live after they came, not their origin, then you got to kind of go outside the box because they only have stories about where they came from. And we're going to show you what they are saying, where they came from. Continues, says, unfortunately, archaeological work in West Africa is as yet in its infancy. Right? What was all the archaeological work? You're saying Africa and West Africa is so ancient, but they haven't really started digging. They haven't really found ancient stuff there. And there, most of the history, again, guys, real kingdoms start in the Middle Ages. We're going to see that. And in practice, useful first-hand accounts of the Negroes have usually been written only after the peoples concerned had already come to a greater or lesser extent under the influence of the North Africans and the trade they brought. Of the peoples east of the Songhai and in the forests from the Gambia to the Niger Delta, we know very little. Again, this is a professor, right? University of Ghana. We don't know. We know very little. The peoples of North Africa do not seem to have established permanent relations with the former before about the 10th century, while they never penetrated at all into the forest. However, it seems probable that even before the Berber invasions of the 10th century that gave rise to the Hausa states, when 10th century, Middle Ages, Hausa, that's when their history starts in Africa. The people of the area from Niger in the west, Lake Chad in the east, and about Benue in the south had already been subject to an appreciable influence from Hamitic-speaking immigrants from the east or northeast, whose original homes may have been in the region of the Nile, Ethiopia, and even southwestern Arabia. Even where? Arabia. So even before the Hausa, right? What we're learning, what I'm learning is that a lot of the, what they're saying, pastoral people, of course they had the San and some of the pygmies, but they also had Hamitic-speaking peoples who were, might have been coming from Arabia, Saudi Arabia. Come on now, Hamitic before the Hausa. Again, the Hausa are saying they came from Baghdad, Iraq. We're going to see that. So pay attention, guys. You see, a lot of these people, we're going to get in depth with all these tribes, but this is just one example. They're telling you these Hamitic people might have been, see, they don't know. It might have been from now, Ethiopia, or even from Arabia. Which one? That's a lot of different places in Arabia would rewrite history, because you told us everything came out of Africa. So that would rewrite history. You guys seeing that, right? There's a professor from the University of Ghana. The newcomers seem to have been largely absorbed with the Negro population, but it seems that their influence probably extended so far as to touch the Yoruba in what is now southwestern Nigeria. And again, guys, just want to point out something before we get to the Hausa info in this book. I just want to show how they admit in all these books from Africa, for example, when it comes to the Empire of Mali, as well, Little is known about the early history of Mali. Little is known. They don't know, guys. They don't know. They don't know. Their history again starts in the 11th century. We're going to read it. It says probably the richest and most powerful of the empires of the Western Sudan. About the middle of the 11th century, Middle Ages, the rulers of the small Mandingo state of Kangaba became converted to Islam. And in the early years to the 13th century, they began to extend their kingdom to the south and southeast. All right. Again, he admitted little is known about the early history. All right, just wanted to point those things out. We get to page 35 here, and it says here Hausa land and the Bornu Kanem. All right, that's where we're talking about today. So the comparable stability marks the history of the Sudan between the Niger Band and the region of Lake Chad. Here, the tradition of divine kinship was, if anything, even stronger. Some of the states of this region, notably the Empire of Bornu Kanem and the Hausa kingdoms, again, you guys are going to see they're related anciently, were much more influential than mostly the Gomba states, which indeed stand somewhat apart from the mainstream of the history of the Western Sudan. The most plausible interpretation of the legends of origin, listen to this, of Bornu Kanem and the Hausa states is that these were the ultimate result of two major movements into the area. Again, into the area. These people came in from somewhere else, just like the Shona Bantu-speaking people of Zimbabwe. These people, the Hausa, the Bornu Kanem people, came in to this area. The first and more fundamental was one of Negro groups coming from the east and northeast, who established a number of small kingdoms over the native agricultural Negro peoples, who they were saying, or he was saying as well, are Hamitic that were there before them. These states developed around walled cities in which ruled kings who were regarded as divine. The customs and institutions of this kind of kingship, so far as they can be reconstructed today, suggest that it had originated in the Nile Valley. It seems probable indeed that even if the original Kanem and Hausa monarchs were not themselves direct offshoots from the Negro kingdoms of Meroe or Kush, which flourished on the Nile above Egypt until the 4th century AD, they had at least come from an area which had been under its close influence, all right? So they might have passed Egypt on their way, I'm talking about modern Egypt, not ancient, right? They might have passed modern Egypt on their way to the Sudan area coming from the Middle East. You guys are going to see their origin story says they came from Baghdad, Iraq, all right? So even here they're telling you, we know they were definitely around there too. They were coming from that way. Secondly, however, these Negro city-states seem to have been infiltrated from the north by desert pastoralists such as the Sagawa, akin to modern Tuareg. So the Tuareg and what they called the Fulani eventually did kind of blend in, come, and eventually in the 1800s kind of take over the power. This second movement seems to have had three important consequences. First, the newcomers merged with the Negro ruling families and took over their concepts of kingship. Secondly, and particularly in Kanem, north and northeast of Lake Chad, the newcomers' cavalry made possible the fusion of the original small kingdoms into larger and more militant states. Thirdly, the centers of these states tended to move towards the south. A little further down says the kingdom of Kanem seems to have come into being about the 8th or 9th century. Guys, come on. That's not ancient. That's close to the Middle Ages, right? That's not ancient. This is when they came. Came from where? The Middle East. By the end of the 11th century, certainly it was powerful enough to have direct contact with Tripoli and Egypt, and its kings became Muslim. The peak of its early development was about the 12th and 13th century, when in addition to colonizing Bornu to the southwest of Lake Chad, the power of Kanem was felt northwards across the desert to Fezzan. Continuing a little further, says the earliest Hausa states, the Hausa Bogwai, true Hausa, generally considered to be 7 in number, Dara, Kanu, Zaria, or Sasu. There go these names again, right? We know they are descendants of that famous Baghdad king or prince who came, into the area. Gober, Katsina, Rano, and Biram, all right, were probably coming into existence by about the 10th century. Come on now, Middle Ages. This is when all this was being formed. These kingdoms are starting. These people are getting to the area of Africa. They are not from Africa anciently. Traditionally, all except Biram were offshoots of Dauda. but any supremacy which Dara may have had over the others seems to have been largely theoretical. The individual states were apt to view with one another for power and influence, and this lack of unity made them open to pressure from the stronger states around them, first Mali and then Songhai in the west, Kanem-Borno in the east, and even during the 16th and 17th century from Kawarafa in the south. The political weakness in the face of external dangers has occasioned some difficulties in the interpretation of early Hausa history. For example, the status of Biram is obscure. It seems likely that its foundation was even earlier than that of Dauda. But lying well to the east, it soon came permanently within the orbit of Borno, and its independent tradition was thus largely lost. So yes, they actually went into the Kanem-Borno area, or Biram, before they ended up in the Hausa lands, the same people. So that he's right. It actually was a little earlier in that side than the Hausa states. Again, Hausa tradition asserts that Islam came to Hausa land from the west, being brought by merchants from Mali who reached Kano in the 14th century. All right, this is not easy to understand in view of early appearance of Islam in Kanem, and the evidence that there is for early Kanem influence in Hausa land. Since Hausa land is, of course, much nearer to Kanem than to ancient Mali, one might have expected Islam to have come to it from the former rather than from the latter. That tradition tells us the reverse, may in part at least be explained if the early Islamization of Hausa rulers was somewhat nominal. The evidence of tradition combines with that of the Fulani Jihad of the early 19th century to suggest that this was in fact the case. It also seems likely that early Kanem influence in Hausa land was to a considerable extent suppressed by the greater power of Mali in the 14th century, a period when the power of Kanem was declining and weak. So on this book regarding the origin of the Hausa and the Kanem-Borno, I mean, that's all they have here, guys. And he told you they came in from somewhere else. Seems they were coming in from the east. All right, that's all they know. That's all they know, guys. They don't know exactly where. So we're going to read their own history. They're going to tell us where they came from. Moving on to this source right here. The book is called The Historian in Tropical Africa. Studies presented and discussed at the 4th International African Seminar at the University of Dakar in Senegal in 1961. Edited with an introduction by J. Bansina R. Moni and L.V. Thomas. All right, that's what we're going to get into right now. Now, something about this book is it explains what other peoples might also derive or descend from the Hausa people. So for example, when the main written source for Gonja history, the name of the first ruler is given as Naba'a, which is close not only to Dagomba word for chief, Na, but also to the names of the founding ancestors of the Mosi, Dagomba, Bawa, Na, Gebwa, Nedega, and of the Hausa Bawo dynasties. Could they be related as they moved westerly? You know, that they stopped in the Hausa lands. We read earlier that most likely they did keep going westernly and have influenced those people as well. And this is also saying basically that the linguistics kind of matches a little bit too. But we'll get into those people later on, okay? He says, I know in eastern Gonja was the town of Kafaba on the Volta south of Salaga, and it is significant that the Muslims there claim to be of Hausa origin, as is also the case at Salaga, Mapaha, and Abuipi, Kante group, all right? Hausa are also found in Wa and again in Kintampo, Bonduku, and other towns in the northern Ivory Coast where the name Maraba is widely used to mean indigo dyer. The importance of their influence in Kumasi was stressed by Botwish and Dupuis. The earliest European reference to Gonja at the beginning of the 18th century seems to come from Hausa source. All right, so again, a lot of different peoples might actually be related to the Hausa. We're going to get into those peoples eventually. Just wanted to go ahead and show that too. On page 339, it says here the beginnings of Hausa society, AD 1000 to 1500 by M.G. Smith. So this is the same guy. The guy was saying he tries to discredit Mr. Smith. You know, he's one of these modern scholars, but he's still going to tell you they came from the east and they're related to the Kanem-Borno people and many other people. So this book is really good, even though he tries to discredit or disregard the chronicles of the people themselves. He does link up a lot of different African tribal people to the Hausa and the Kanem-Borno people. I'll show some examples. But he says right here, the Hausa of northern Nigeria and Niger evidently have a long history, much of which is obscure. Huh? Obscure. You don't know. Arab travelers who visited these people during the European Middle Ages left important notes, local chronicles, again, local chronicles of the people, their stories, supply additional data, which can be checked with one another and against the chronicles of nearby states. Linguistic analysis yield other evidence of contact between certain groups. That's what we were just talking about. They had that chat, right, related to the Kanem-Borno people. Archaeological discoveries on the borders of Hausa land suggest certain hypotheses. So the archaeology that they try to use is the hypothesis part. That's where they try to link them to the Sahara. On page 340, it says, the Hausa, who may now number about 6 million souls, speak a shadow Hamitic. So remember how they were saying there was possibly Hamitic peoples there before they got there from the Chad region and before they came from Baghdad, right? So Shadow Hamitic language, which has affinities with the tongues of the Kotoko, Jadina Mubi, and Musgu in the Chad Basin further east. Widespread tradition points to a wave of immigration into this area from the east, not north, during the 9th and 10th centuries AD. The immigrants may have included Hamitic-speaking Negroes from the Chad Basin as well as Berbers pushed south as west by Arab pressure. May have. A common Hausa myth of origin. Listen to this. This is where you got to dodge the hijack with these historians. And that's what the guy earlier, and I read that report, it told you, modern historians try to discredit the story. So look what he's saying. He's saying the common Hausa myth of origin relates the westward flight of one Bayajidda from Baghdad to Kanem, right? That's where he landed first, Borno, like I said, already the dominant state in the Chad Basin. The Mai of Bornu gave Bayajidda his daughter, the Magira, as wife, but deprived him of his followers. Bayajidda fled west in the fear of the Mai, leaving his wife at Biram Ta Gabas to bear him a son. At Gaya near Kano, he met some blacksmiths who made him a knife at his direction. Further north, he came to a town whose people were deprived of access to water by a great snake known as Sarki, chief. Right? So it was a chief, it was a clan, it was a people actually. He slew the snake with his sword and watered his thirsty mouth. In reward, the queen of the village daughter married him and also gave him a guardian concubine. By Dara, Bajajida had a son called Bawu and another called Karbogari, town sizer. By the concubine, he ruled Dara's people until he died and was then succeeded by Bawu. Bawu in turn had 6 sons, 3 sets of twins, who became the rulers of Kano and Rano, Katsina and Sasu, Daria, Gobert and Dauda. With Biram, which was ruled by Bajajida's issue born of the Bornu princes, these 6 states formed the Hausa Bagwai, the 7 Hausa states. Karbogari's issue also established another 7 states, namely Kebi, Sampara, Gwari, Birnin Gwari, Jukun, Yoruba, Oyo, Nupe, and Yauri. These latter formed the Bansa Bagwai, the bastard warflip of non-Hausa states, alright? So they're not the official, they call them non-Hausa states, but they are somewhat related. Thus, the Hausa myth of origin is also a myth of the origin of nearby non-Hausa societies. It seems probable that the immigrants mentioned in this myth introduced certain cultural traits, such as animal transport, well digging, and perhaps the use of knives and swords. Iron Age, right? Iron Age. They probably followed different water courses on their westward journey and may have entered Hausa land at different places and times. It is not unlikely that they differed among themselves in race, dialect, and various cultural features. The Hausa known to history and ethnology are descended from the union of these immigrant settlers with native peoples. Okay? They mixed. So remember, they're saying Hamites also migrated there. And then these people, the Hausa coming from Baghdad also, so they came together, they came to Hausa, he's saying. All right, so again, you got to dodge the hijack. He's calling it a myth, but this is their chronicles. This is their official palace story of origin and everything. This is what they have the lineage, they have the trees, the genealogy, all that, guys. This is what they're calling myth. Because again, it doesn't fit with mainstream history of out of Africa theories. Continuing a little ahead, it says at Dara, the immigrants, again, the immigrants, colonists, the immigrants apparently won control without much struggle. perhaps because they could furnish secure water supplies and had the advantage of cavalry and the sword. At Kano, there was a prolonged conflict which conquest did not fully resolve. The Abagi Jawa had already witnessed the arrival of several immigrant groups before they were overwhelmed by a host under Bagoda, who settled at Shim. His successors beguiled the elders with gifts and obtained dominion over them. But the natives refused intermarriage. The immigrants and natives lived side by side but practiced different cults, and for several generations their conflict had a religious form. The immigrants sought to subvert the cult of the natives, who resisted with vigor, even after the immigrants exercised the power of rule. I interpret these traditions as indications of a confused period of immigration, struggle, and cultural change, the violence and duration of which probably varied over time as well as placed in accordance with differences of population structure. All right. And this book right here is called West Africa, An Introduction to Its History, Civilization, Contemporary Situation by Eugene L. Mendonça. I just want to show you how basic the info is in a lot of these books. It says here the early Hausa states. The Hausa inhabit the northwestern and north central parts of modern day Nigeria and spread farther west and north in the Republic of Niger up to the edges of the Sahara Desert. In fact, as with Swahili in East Africa, the Hausa language is a major trade language all over West Africa, and Hausa traders live in various places throughout the region. Those ancients, who came to be known as Hausa, were of mixed ethnic backgrounds fed by migrations and invasions through the ages. Migrations, they were foreigners, colonists. The autochthons are usually referred to as the Habi. Though some early kings likely emerged from the Habi, there were also invasions by powerful elites into the Hausa land. Example, the Kawaro dynasty. The early Hausa kings were pagans, practicing animism and using magic, medicines, and divination in court to support their rule. Were they doing that in ancient Babylon or Iraq? Assyrians, were they doing that? During this era, the ruling Sarki was not allowed to die of natural causes, an indication of the common practice in Africa, as of associating the health of the king with that of the kingdom's prosperity. And that's pretty much it about the origins. All they know is that it was fed by migrations and invasions. All right, remember we got it in the other books. This all started in the Middle Ages. And again, they were coming from the East. All right, we move on to this book. It says here, West African History, 1000 to 1960. A revision scheme for students preparing for the West African Certificate Examination, O level, and the East African Certificate Examination. All right, this is what you have to know to pass that test. And over on page 8, it says here, topic 3, the Hausa states, 1000 to 1800. It says origins. According to tradition, Dara and Biram were the oldest Hausa states. 7 states are recognized as being true Hausa Bogwai, Daura, Biram, Gobert, Kano, Katsina, Rano, and Saria. 7 others are false Hausa, Bansa Bogwai or Hausa Bansa, Samfara, Kebi, Jauri, Gwari, Kawarafa, Ju, Kun, Nupe, Yoring. Now we read earlier because of the so-called he was a bastard son, one of the descendants of the original Bayajidda from Baghdad. This indicates that the true Hausa were the early settlements, and the others were regions to which Hausa culture spread. The Hausa people are probably a mixture of immigrants from different directions. Probably. So again, guys, you have to know this to take the exam, and we're going off probably. So they want students to just think, oh, probably, we don't know, probably. A mixture of immigrants, definitely immigrants from different directions, about AD 1000. All right, immigrant pastoralists had formed ruling dynasties and controlled the original Dala agriculturalists. Each state was centered around a fortified town, Terni. The town existed first as a stronghold where the country people went for protection in times of war. It later developed as a market, then as a center of international trade. Hausa land was well situated to benefit from east-west trade and north-south trade. The leading cities became important centers of commerce and craftsmanship, and exported cloth and leather goods. Hausa merchants brought salt from Bilma, cola, nuts, and slaves from the Yoruba slaves. lands as well as the products of the Western Sudan states. The Hausa states frequently fought among themselves, and any alliance between states seldom lasted very long. Until about 1590, most of the states were under the control of more powerful neighbors, Songhai and Kanem-Borno. So they paid tribute to them, and what they leave out in a lot of this history, they don't even tell these students that the Kanem-Borno and even the Songhai are actually related in some way to the Hausa. We know that the Hausa came from the Kanem-Borno area, and that eventually they spread out to where they're saying Songhai. So they are related. But that's pretty much it regarding the origins, and that's all you have to know. That they probably a mixture of immigrants. We don't have to guess from where. We could just conjecture. Probably. Well, what if I told you they were coming from Baghdad, Iraq, and they only got there in the Middle Ages? All right, guys. So I hope you're following along. So what I want to read from this book we're going to get into now is a little of the prehistory of the area. Again, wanted to go ahead and get the perspective of this anthropologist when it comes to the Hausa and that region of Africa. It says here, History of West Africa, Volume 1, edited by J.F.A. Ajaji, Vice Chancellor, University of Lagos, and Michael Crowder, Professor of History and Director of the Center for Nigerian Cultural Studies, Ahmadu Bello University. All right, so we go to page 15, and it says here, Peoples and Cultures. Unlike in East and Central Africa, there have been no spectacular archaeological finds which might illuminate the history of early man or men like apes in West Africa, guys. Basically, there's no ancient history there when it comes to archaeology. People try to say that people like the Olmec and all these other so-called black Indian races or peoples were coming from West Africa, but there's not even no archaeological evidence of any ancient history there in West Africa. There is, however, a growing body of archaeological evidence of the settlement of the area from the early Paleolithic or Old Stone Age period, right? That's when the Khoisan come into play. There is no reason to doubt that from that time on, the dominant racial group in West Africa has been Negroid, with slight incursions of members of the Caucasoid race. Negroid occupation, in fact, extended over a large part of the present-day Sahara Desert, and it has been suggested that many of the rock paintings in that area, remember who was the rock painters? That was the Khoisan people, as they migrated down in that area, were due to animal-rearing Negroes, whose descendants are still to be found even today in the desert. Even today in the Kalahari Desert, right? That's where the Khoisan live today. That's who they're talking about. These were the first actual people there that they can determine. Before that, no archaeological evidence of any people there, significant people there, right? All right? This is from your scholars, West African scholars, right? They're telling you right here, the Khoisan most likely were the first. In terms of historical significance, now when it comes to historical times, we distinguish between savanna and forest Negroes. The former in general tend to be tall in stature and dark brown in skin color. Some of the best known among them include the Soninke, the Malinke, the Bambara, the Mosi, the Songhai, and the Hausa. So like a lot of these people might be related anciently, guys. At least their linguistics are. And the Kanuri. The Soninke, Malinke, and Bambara belong to a group which are commonly referred to as Mandingos or Mande speaking. They are significant in West Africa history as a group which established some of the ancient West African empires. Murdoch ascribes to them the invention of the agriculture in Sudan. The invention, right? Again, all happening. Middle Ages. So continuing on page 20, it says, east of the Mosi is the country of the Hausa. Though essentially Negro and culturally homogeneous, the Hausa are not a homogeneous ethnic group. Indeed, the word is mainly a linguistic significance, denoting all those people of the western and central Sudan who speak the Hausa language as their mother tongue. According to tradition, according to the local people, the Hausa are all descendants of one Bayajidda Abu Jasidu, all right, son of Abdullahi, king of Baghdad. All right, they descend from who? The latter, after quarreling with his father, journeyed to Borno and thence to Dara, where he slew a snake that used to prevent the local people from drawing water from a well. The queen of Daura then married Bayajidda and had a son called Bawo. When his father died, Bawo ascended his throne and had 6 sons who became the kings of Kano, Saso, Saria, Gober, Katsina, Rano, and Biram. Together with Daura, these states were known as the Hausa Bagwai, or the Seven Hausa States, in contradistinction to the Bansa Bagwai, or the Seven Bastard Hausa States, which were probably states under the Hausa influence, all right? Again, did he say it's a myth? Did they tell you right here is a myth? It's local tradition. Again, journeyed to Borno first, and from there moved westward into the Hausa lands. And again, a lot of those other people moving more west are related to these same people. Again, coming from Baghdad, Iraq. Going ahead on page 28, just want to read this part before we leave. It says, one of the most striking facts of West African history has been the persistence in various forms of a general movement of population into these forest regions. In ancient times, as already emphasized, all right, listen to what he's going to say. This southward movement was an involuntary act by smaller and weaker tribal groups in the face of aggressive incursions of stronger immigrant communities. There has been no conclusive explanation as to the background of these movements from the north. The early Arab geographers treated the movement as the southwestward continuation from the east of the dispersal of people after the great flood of biblical mythology. Huh? Wadi ibn Munabbih, writing in 738, asserted that the descendants of Cush, who was the son of Ham and the grandson of Noah, include the people of the Sudan. Let's remember, what lot did Ham get and his people? The hot places of the earth, the hot southern places. El-Masudi, the greatest of the medieval Arab geographers, wrote in the same vein 200 years later in AD 947. According to him, when the descendants of Noah spread across the earth, the sons of Cush, the son of Canaan, traveled toward the west and crossed the Nile. There, they separated some of them. The Nubians and the Beja and the Sanj turned to the rightward between the east and west, but the others, very numerous, marched towards the setting sun, or eastward. So it kind of matches what they were saying earlier about that. Before the Hausa were there seems to be some pastoral Hamitic races. Right? That's why their language, the Hausa language, is Shad Hamitic. Continuing on page 178, it says, in this section we shall be concerned with the story of the Hausa-speaking people, because we still know very little about the early history of the others. They don't know anything before that, guys. Again, more scholars, West African professors, and all these universities, they don't know. They could only assume and conjecture. The territory we are studying is the western part of our zone, but it has no name derived from its natural features. It is Khazar, look at that, Khazar Hausa, Khazar Hausa, the land of the Hausa language. The derivation and antiquity of the word Hausa are unknown. They don't know, but no earlier term has come down to us. Again, the extent of this territory during the last millennium BC and the first AD is uncertain. They don't know what was going on there before these people reached there, guys, as we do not know precisely when the southward movements of Hausa-speaking groups occasioned by the desiccation of the Central Sahara took place. So this is going with them coming from the Sahara, guys, because this guy is he's one of those modern scholars that goes with Smith, the guy we just read that was denying their own people's story, right? But we just read earlier in the same book, right, that their origin story is coming from Baghdad, Iraq. A king of Iraq, his son, Prince, came to this land. That's why they don't know precisely when the southward movements of Hausa-speaking came from Sahara, because it didn't happen from the Sahara, guys. They're clearly telling you we don't know. So why you keep going with that? By the beginning of the present millennium, however, when state-like political organizations among this people begin to appear, it would probably be safe to say that communities of Hausa speakers were established throughout the country, roughly bounded by a line running from Asben southwards as far as the northeastern corner of the Jos Highlands, thence westward the great bend of the Kaduna River, thence northwest to the valley of the Gulbin Kebi, and thence northeastward to Asben. All right? So they don't know the history before that, and they're only conjecturing about them coming from Sahara. Their legends, their chronicles, and the linguistics and all the traditions of the Kanem-Borno and Hausa people and a lot of other people you're going to see are telling you the same thing. They came from Baghdad. On page 185 of the book, it says, in this general consideration of the emergence of states in Hausa land, we must briefly examine the significance of the story of the Hausa Bakwai, the Hausa Seven. This is a legend of unknown antiquity. All right, they didn't say it's a myth. Smith is calling it a myth, but these scholars right here, they ain't calling it a myth. They're saying we don't know. We know it's old. It's an old legend and story, a chronicle current in the southern half of Hausa land, which assigns a particular importance to a group of 7 state governing dynasties, which appear to have emerged during the first 3 centuries of this millennium. This legend gives a common family origin to these dynasties, okay, by making them descendants of the hero Bayajidda. Thus, Byram, a son of Bayajidda, was the founder of the dynasty of Garum Gabas. Bawo, another son, was father of the remaining founders, Gasauda and Dauda, the Kumaiju and Katsina, Bagauda and Kano, Samagari and Rano, Gunguma and Sasau, Duma and Gober. But though firmly embedded in the folklore, again, firmly embedded in the folklore of southern Hausaland, this legend is of doubtful historical significance. See, they don't want to accept it. These are one of your modern scholars here. The legend is also disputed by the folklore of Gober, which disassociates the dynasty from the son of Bawo. Again, a lot of Fulani took over, a lot of different ethnic groups eventually took over the Hausa states, guys. It appears indeed that the center of Gober, in the period we're considering down to the late 15th century, lay considerably to the north of the territory of the other 6, and has been in fact, and only came into close contact with them in the late 15th century, right? So that's not a reason to dispute the legend, right? Just because that doesn't make sense to me. But guys, do you see how they're trying to discredit and disregard the local palace official legends, their chronicles of their oral history, right? Passed down from their ancestors one by one. The kings follow this, the story of the Bayajidda. Real quick, just want to point out some things they're saying here. These scholars, right? West African says very little is known about their history at any time before the 19th century. A little further down, it says Gober, Katsina, and Sasso down to 1450. Unfortunately, we know very little about these states before the late 15th century. We don't know. All right, thanks for being honest. All right, so we continue to another source, guys, and we're almost done here with sources, but I just want to make sure you guys see that I use all the main sources that they go to, and they're all pretty much saying the same thing. And as you guys can see so far, they don't know anything other than what the local people themselves are really saying. Now, this book is Africans, the History of a Continent, John Elifi. Real quick, in page 11, it says here, a large Afro-Asiatic family today embraces the languages of Ethiopia, the Berber tongue of North Africa, the Hausa language of northern Nigeria, and small groups as far south as northern Tanzania, together with Arabic Hebrew, and in the past, ancient Egyptian. All right, so again, Afro-Asiatic Hausa, Asiatic language Hausa. Continuing, we go to chapter 5. It says here, this is page 62, colonizing society in Western Africa. All right, colonizers. Now we got to dodge the hijack a little bit. I'll explain. It says from Senegal to Angola, most Western Africans of the forest and the immediately adjoining savannah spoke Niger Congo languages. North of them, also in the savannah, were survivors of groups probably driven southward by the desiccation of the Sahara. So you see how they don't know? They just made that up, that they come from the Sahara. When we're talking about the Hausa, speaking either Nilo-Saharan languages, notably the Songhai people of the Middle Niger, or Afro-Asiatic tongues, the Hausa of modern northern Nigeria. Again, they didn't come from the Sahara, so, and them saying probably proves that they don't know and that they're making it up. You gotta pay attention to the wording they're using. He don't know. All right, so on page 73, going into our topic here with the Hausa and the Borno people, shown here a link again. It says their retreat southwestward from Kanem brought Borno's rulers into closer contact with the plains to the west, which are today occupied by the Hausa people of northern Nigeria. Hausa origins are a mystery. Uh-oh, my story, mystery. Oh, you want to tell us his story, right? That they came from the Sahara. But you just told us, right? He was just telling us that they came from the Sahara, but now it's a mystery. They speak a relatively homogeneous Afro-Asiatic language whose closest affinities are to the East and modern Chad. But many scholars think they must have retreated southward from Saharan desiccation over a long period. Many believe, scholars believe, but what do the people say? The people tell you their legends and their genealogy and ancestry and founders and their kings, their chiefs, their progenitors. They know. It's not about belief. A little further down it says traditions recorded in the 17th century, Kano Chronicle, and by modern researchers suggest that in the early second millennium AD, Hausa land was divided into many microstates, often clustering around ironworking centers for the granite outcrops sacred to the nature spirits. Although Islam may have reached the region from Kanem at an earlier date, the Kano Chronicle emphasizes the arrival of traders during the mid-14th century, possibly from Songhai, and certainly some impulse must then have drawn Hausa land into savannah and desert trade, for during the 15th century new trading polities emerged not only there but in Agadis to the north and Yoruba land to the south. So again, that's the history they have here. When it comes to origins, they don't really know. They're again guessing. They're saying they probably came from the Sahara because the desert dried up. They don't know when. They can't tell you any source. They're just assuming, and they're disregarding the Bayajidda story, the local traditions, the Kano chronicles, where they're clearly telling you where these people are from. So continuing, I found this website is an actual excerpt. It seems like from a book or a PDF. On the top, it does say Hausa history in the context of the ancient Near Eastern world. So we're just gonna belly flop to wherever part of this. It says here, ancient kingdoms, Hausa states. It's gotta be from a journal entry. It says, by way of North Africa, while the second began in Baghdad, it came to Hausa land via Bornu. All right, Baghdad. In view of the overall relevance of the Canaanite Phoenician background for Hausa culture, it would appear that the two lines of immigration reflect the two basic tendencies of Canaanite Israelite history, the local aspect by the queens from Canaan and her numerous followers, and the extraneous Baghdadian, or rather Ashur Babylon aspect by the isolated male hero. So who was this guy coming from Baghdad? So maybe he wasn't carrying an Islamic faith, but he was an ancient Assyrian or Babylonian, so-called. However, it would be wrong to reduce the legend solely to its ancient Near Eastern prototype. A local West African element would seem to be implied by the Bornean suzerainty. The two lines merging in Dara would further appear to refer to the two sections of Hausa society, the Queen of Dauda and her son Bawo to the Hausa, and the Baghdadian hero Bayajidda and his son with the concubine, who in some versions was already pregnant when she arrived with the hero and Dauda, to the Azna. It may be noted in passing that according to this interpretation, the Azna were the secondary and foreign people and not, as often supposed, the primary and local population. In terms of local history in the Long Dure, the provenance of Bayajidda from Bornu probably reflect an ancient and long-lasting suzerainty of the Chadic state over Hausa land. Acknowledging their dependency on Bornu, all the Hausa states, the 7 Hausa as well as the 7 Bansa, sent annual tributes of slaves to their eastern neighbor until the beginning of the 19th century. All right, slaves. Some authors consider therefore the Bayajidda legend as a Bornu tax list, and view the primordial subordination of the Hausa states to Kanem-Borno. It would in fact appear that the Chadic state stood since ancient times in the center of a regional system of security based on age-honored tributary relationships. The system implied that as long as the tributary obligations were fulfilled, peace was guaranteed, and the slave and raids were directed against other people of the Central Sudan. On account of their basic economic and political functions, the nuclei of states first established in the Sahel in the form of fortified slave trading posts and garrisons could in this way easily spread further south and reach Yoruba land. The Chadic state stood as the apex of the regional system of security for different ethnic groups for a long time. It had been itself submitted to a prestational, it says here, system of forwarding slaves to the North Lauren in the early Islamic period. All right, so it's hard to read that, but yeah. So continuing right here, and it says here, oral version of the Bayajidda legend. This is the appendix, number 11. It might come as a surprise that despite long-term academic research on Hausa history, the following text was the first full oral version of the Bayajidda legend of Dara. Alasan Abdurrahman, the son of the Emir Abdurrahman Dan Musa, 1912-1966, dictated the text on the eve of the Ghani festival, 1995. The narrator was born in 1932 and died in early 1996. According to his own statement, he was asked by the late Emir Abdurrahman to collect all available information on the Bayajidda legend and write it down. He had three main informants: his father, Abdurrahman, the brother of Abdurrahman, the Wasirin Dauda, and the Galadima Sule, the brother of the present Emir Mohammadu Bashar. Having completed his research and being literate only in his native language, he wrote down the Bayajidda story in Hausa and gave the only copy to the Emir Abdurrahman. Since then, he earned the reputation of being the official court historian of Dauda. All the important visitors to the town were referred to him. Subsequent to the recording of the following oral account, Malam Alasan worked for several days with me on various aspects of the Bayajidda narrative and unrelated praise songs and court ceremonies of Dauda. The informant pointed out that because of its bearing on the palace, only royals knew the story well. The royals knew, not the commoners. Unfortunately, he did not pass on his knowledge of court history to any of his children nor to any other person. Continue says the earlier published versions of the Bayajidda narrative are mostly based on Arabic texts written down towards the end of the pre-colonial period by locally trained Muslim clerics. The best known and most widely used was translated by A. Walwyn and published by H.R. Palmer. Two other noteworthy written versions of the legend were translated by E.J. Arnett and Hassan Shuabu. All right, you see all these people telling you that is their origin story. Further, there is an Arabic text published in conjunction with a French translation by A. Salifou. Oral versions from various commoners are found in the writings of R.M. East, Abu Bakr Imam, G. Nicholas, and F. Edgar. The Bayajidda narrative has been the object of various studies. The following are noteworthy: Bar, Travels 1, 471, 472, Palmer, Bornu Sahara, right, and all these other references. Halam, Bayajidda legend. Look at all the sources. Alright guys, you see all the sources? This is their origin story, carried down throughout generations. None of these studies fully explore the deep root of the story in Hausa society and its implications for the connection between the emergence of states in Hausa land and the Trans-Sahara trade activities of the Phoenician city-states of North Africa. That's why they had connections to the Middle East. They were coming from there, a lot of their people, based on a transcription of the Hausa oral text. The following is a literal word for word translation, even if sometimes a bit tortuous. It hopefully conveys some of the flavor of the oral count. Hesitations, sudden shifts of the mind, and repetitions are indicated by dots. Minor slips of the tongue have been omitted. I am grateful to Mohammed Munkaila from the University of Maiduguri for his transcription of the tape and for his assistance in the translation of the Hausa text into English. An early translation by Ibrahim Hamza provided useful cross-referencing. I hope at a later date to be able to provide a more elaborate exploration of the story in connection with the early history of Hausaland. The main purpose of this presentation is the rapid publication of the oral text that thus precludes in-depth interpretation. Now we're going to get right into this. This is pretty interesting because it explains, remember that Bayajidda, he came from Baghdad. He married a local queen from the Dauda people. So now right here is going to tell us the origin of those people. These were the local people when Bajajidda got there, so they weren't even from Africa either originally. Listen to this. It says the origin of the people of Dauda was that they migrated from Palestine. All right, Palestine. The person who led the migration was Najib, the grandson of Canaan. Listen, this is real genealogy, real history. They came to Egypt. From Egypt, some of his relations stayed in Ethiopia. The others proceeded forward and came to Egypt, where they stayed. They were disturbed by conflicts and unrest. Therefore, they left Egypt and went to Libya. From Libya, they slipped up. Some of them went towards the Sudan by the will of God. Dara was the one who led them to Kutugu, a place situated in the desert very close to Timbuktu, near Mali. From there, they came down to the town of Dara. Where they left Dara, they came to Kufai. From Kufai, they went to another town called Rafa, situated in the Francophone country. At Rafa, they split. Then Inagari, the grandmother of Duma of Gobir, led them. Then Kafara led them to Sohong, Berni, Old City. Then after Kafara, Yakano, then Yakalija, then Kadanta, then Waiwaila, then Didigir, then Yagari, then Wairama, and then Daurama. At that time, the women were ruling. Men did farming and hunting. Okay, you guys hear that? Matriarchal. Then Daurama, according to history, that is to say, the book of Gurgum, she found that there was a certain place where her ancestors had settled. It was situated south of Daura. Then she went southward up to a place where she saw the snake. She said, "You should come. I saw that it was here that our ancestors settled." At that time of the arrival of Daurama, the Hausa language was the same as ours. However, there were some differences. When they got used to the snake inside the well, they made him like a king. When they went to the rim of the well, this is what they used to sing. You, Cody, you, mother son, the sun is high. You, Cody, you. Then the thing in the well heard the song. Cody, you, here we came. Here we are waiting. It is already high noon. It is midday. We did not drink water yet. Thereafter the snake moved aside. It gave them water, or rather, they fetched water. When the people had fetched water from the well, which was in the bush, they left. They would count 1 week before coming back. After a week, they came back. Thus, from 1 week to another, the snake became accustomed to that. So that was what was happening. Then Abu Yasidu, listen to this. So they were already there, right? This is, guys, in the Chad region, Kanem-Borno area, in the Hausa lands, right? They were already there when Abu Yasidu arrived, right? That's the Bayajidda's legend, the son of the king of Baghdad, Abdullahi. He was the person referred to as Abu Yasidu. When the Queen Saddam conquered Baghdad, the people separated into 40 groups. You guys hear that? A queen conquered Baghdad. A queen. Could have been an Amazonian, huh? Abu Yasidu led one of the groups comprising the 300 people and entered Nigeria. All right? He didn't come alone. This is what I was saying. 40 groups comprising 300 people and entered Nigeria from the direction of Lake Chad by the town of Nagala. Okay, this is in their chronicles, guys. Do you guys see what's going on? A lot of these people in modern day Africa are not originally Africans, and that's okay. There was melanated people all over the world. Remember my video on the Andaman Islanders? They are native to that part of the world. They are Asians. Their haplogroup proves it. All right? So don't be surprised when we're reading all this. Let's not practice cognitive dissonance. Let's not go off monkey bones and all that. Come on, we got to be better than that. This is their story. This is their oral history. They telling you they came. And now we're learning a whole deeper part of this, a whole deeper part of it. He didn't just marry a local, tribal African indigenous person, even though they were there for a couple of generations already. The Dauda had already come from Palestine. Come on. Remember that the indigenous people were the cave painters. Most likely the San were related to the Khoisan people, Berbers and Pygmies. Those are the more original people. But the Khoisan, so-called Stone Age, they were in the areas before all these people. And we're going to talk about the Khoisan, all right, in future videos. So he came with 300 people, right, from Baghdad, Iraq, and entered Nigeria from the direction of Lake Chad by the town of Nagala. It was from the name of Nagala that the title Galadima was derived. He arrived at Borno at a time when it was not yet called Borno, but rather Gasargamu. When he came to Gasargamu, he met the people staying there with their king. When he realized that the king's people were few and that his own people were more numerous and stronger than those of the king of Borno, listen, more stronger, he made up his mind to make a plot to have the king killed so that he became the ruler of Borno. However, the news of the plot reached the king of Borno. Did you hear that the stranger who came is planning to kill you? The king of Borno gathered his senior officials and they took a decision. It was decided that he should give him his daughter called Magaram in marriage. Consequently, when there was an outbreak of war, he borrowed all the slaves of Abu Yasiru. Whenever he conquered any town, he ordered some of the slaves to stay in the town. This practice continued until Bayajidda was left with only one slave and his wife. So they remained only three in number. Abu Yasiru realized that what he formerly had planned against the king was now directed against him. That is all. Therefore, he decided that in the night he himself, his slave, and his wife would leave the town in order to proceed towards the west. Remember, so that's the Kanem-Borno Empire. He had gotten there from Baghdad. He eventually was able to get with the daughter of the king. That's what allowed them to be supposedly in peace. But he kind of realized, okay, now this guy wants to kind of kill me now. So he's going further west. That's where he's going to go into the Hausa lands, right? They arrived at a town called Gabas da Biram, the east of Biram, situated at present in Hadeja, and now called Garun Gabas, eastern wall. At Garun Gabas, he realized that the king of Borno could easily get hold of him there. Therefore, he sneaked out at night, leaving behind his wife and slave. He continued on his course further west until he reached Gaya. The present Abagiyawa people of Kano were originally from Gaya. They are blacksmiths. I listened to this. Gaya, wow. He drew out his knife and said to him, "This is what I lost on my way, and I would like you to produce for me its similar make." And they did what was requested from them to produce. He headed northward into the wilderness without any destination in mind. This until God brought him to a certain place. He said to himself, "For sure, in this forest I will find a town." From there, God brought him to Dauda. He arrived at Dauda in the night. He entered by the eastern gate. When he came, he cut a tree in order to climb the town. He opened the gate. He had tied his horse outside the gate. Then he opened the gate. Then he went back, pulled his horse, and entered the town. God in his power, when he arrived in the town, he went to a house which he believed belonged to a male person. But actually, he entered into the house of an old woman. The woman was called Ayana. Her house is situated near the prison in Dauda. When he saw the old woman, you will wonder how they could communicate. In fact, they were all Arabs. All right, remember, these people were coming from Palestine. Although now we are all of us black people. Now they're so-called black, right? Just like you. Uh-oh, what happened? He was addressing her saying, "I would like to have water. Please give it to me." She replied by saying, "No, my son. We in this town do not get water except on Fridays." He said to her, "I still ask you to give me water." He insisted she give him a bucket. She gave it to him, but he said, "Please show me the direction of the well." She said, "Look over there. Inside that thick forest there is a well." Being a brave man, Abu Yasiru headed towards the bush where the well was situated. As soon as he reached the rim of the well, he continued holding his horse and looked into the well to see what was inside, because Kusugu at that time was a hole of limited size. The water of Kusugu did not rise up like a spring. It came from different sides, and where it met, it went up and after some time dropped down. When Abu Yasiru looked into the well and saw the snake, he tied his horse, let the bucket down into the well. The snake held the bucket and pressed it down. Abu Yasiru did not know how to fetch the water from the well since Ayana had told him, "Even if I explain to you how to get water from the well, you will not be able to apply this properly." He remembered the word kinsaki, you release. Therefore he said, "You release." Thereupon the snake released the bucket, and he pulled up the bucket with the water. He drank and gave water to his horse. Then he put the bucket back in the well. He took his sword, waiting for the snake to come out. The snake took hold of the bucket. By pulling out the bucket, he also pulled out the snake. Allah gave him success, and with his sword he cut off the snake's head. The snake fell back on one side. He followed it and cut off the remainder of the head. He put the head of the snake inside his bag and went back to the house of Ayana, the old woman. He gave her water. She drank and wondered about what happened between him and the snake. Early in the morning, when the people came out, they knew that if the snake was out, it would cause havoc. Because of that, the news started spreading that today Sarki is out of the well. Although today is not the normal day of his appearance, finally the news reached Daurama. Then Daurama said, "Let us get ready as we used to. Let us go and beg him." Daurama instructed an announcement to be made that the people should come out towards the snake. There is a certain drum called Dajinjing. As soon as they heard this drum, they knew that they should go to the rim of the well. Right now that the Jinjin is at the palace of Daura. It is the instrument they beat at the night preceding the Gani festival. If you come tonight, you can find women playing it for the king. They are singing the song of the well for him, the song that used to be sung for the snake that was killed. King, we praise thee. We thank thee. We pay homage to thee. Bull, you are very strong. Your power supersedes that of all others. King, he was generous to you. He passed away. That song was originally sung in praise of Abu Yasidu. It was this song which was turned into the praise song of the Dauda royals. Alright, you guys hear that? That makes it such as if when they sing it, the snake is present. Although actually everybody knows that the snake was killed. When the inhabitants of Dara arrived with Daurama, they stayed at a distance since nobody dared to go near the mouth of the well. However, one person called Audu Indi was the one who cautiously moved forward until he reached the rim of the well. He looked closely at the snake. Then he came and told Daurama the news. Today the killer has been killed for us. He passed away. Kara, Daurama asked. Alright, the killer, more than just a snake, guys. He passed away. You are Kauda. That is the reason why the title Kauda spread in Hausaland. Therefore, if you see a hero, he is called Kauda. After the people had come and surrounded the place, Daurama said, an announcement should be made that whoever killed the snake, I will divide the land into two and give him half of it. We will rule together. So there, and then having all gathered, one cut and brought a head, another tried to match it, yet another cut and brought another head. Finally, when the old lady Ayana had got the news, she came to the place of Daurama. She knelt down and greeted her. Then she said, yesterday, I had an outstanding visitor, who even gave me water to drink. Daurama said to her, all right, you should go and call him. Ayana went and met him. She said, all right, my son, you should go to the well. Daurama is looking for you. He came. Daurama said, the old lady claimed that you killed the snake. Abu Yasidu said, I am the one who killed it. Daurama said, all right, if you have the head, bring it out. He put his hand inside his bag. He brought out the head of the snake. Someone tried, and it matched exactly the head of the snake. Abu Yasidu said, I heard that you promised that whoever killed the snake, you would give him half of the land. All right, I do not want half of the land. I want to marry you. At that time, queens did not get married. Whoever was a queen, she should not know a man. All right, doesn't that sound like the Amazonians? All right, Daurama considered what the man had done, all the things he had accomplished with respect to the snake. She said that she agreed to marry him. Then they tied the marriage. Daurama said, however, you will not be able to consummate the marriage with me. It is only once I remove the obstacle between us that you will be able to consummate the marriage. Meanwhile, let me give you a slave with whom you can stay. She offered them a place where they could stay inside the palace, he and the slave Baghdad that she gave to him. They stayed together until God gave her pregnancy. Then she gave birth to a male child. She got the permission of her husband to give the name to the child. She said, he should be called Kara Dagadi. It means he snatched the town. Then Daurama became worried because of the child in his name. Finally, by the power of God, Daurama also became pregnant. Nobody knew what the sex of the child would be. She prayed and God helped her to give birth to a male child. She too requested for the permission to give the name to her child. She said, since that one got the permission, it would be more appropriate to give it to me. Since that one was called Karab Degari, meaning snatcher of the town, mine should have the name Bawo, meaning he should give it back to the rightful owners. That is why the name of her child is Bawo, give it back. All right, when Abu Yasidu died and Danurama also died, people said that Bawo, being the son of Bagajidda Daurama, should succeed his mother. He was the first male child and male king, and the 10th by counting because his mother was the ninth. That means that he was the first male on the throne of Dauda and became the 10th ruler. But the counting starts from him up to the present king of Dauda. All right, so they were leaving, 9 generations behind of kings, because again, these were the local people, so-called local, but they had been coming from Palestine, right? They weren't the indigenous people. They had been there a couple generations, all right? So after Bawas, remember, this is the relationship between the guy from Baghdad and Dauda, who was there a couple generations, her people, but they had originally come from Palestine, and they had a son named Bawa. And Bawa had become ruler, he said, "This son of Bagwadija, you are the son of a slave, the son of the slave of my mother." Because of that, he made him an errant magician. He said to him, "Well, what I want from you at a certain time." Bawa, gave birth to these children. Bawa, he said to him, "Well, you keep on being an errant magician for me." Thus he turned him into a Ba-ma-guje. Hence he said to him, "You will keep on doing all the things that Magu-sawa are doing." That was the actual origin of Magu Sansi. All the superstitions which are to be performed, you are the one to do them. I am the one who rules, but the rituals, you are the one to do them. So when the time went on, Bawa inherited him. Later on, Bawa gave birth to 6 sons: Dauda, Kano, Katsina, Gobir, Rano, Sasau, Saria, the 7th being Gabas Tabiram. At that place, Abu Yasiru left his son. If you count, you will find out that there are 6 Hausa, while the 7th is Gabas Tabiram. As for the son of Bagawarija, Karab Degari, he established Yunkunawa, Kawararapawa people, the people of Kebi, Igala. All the people around this region are called Bansa Bagwai, 7 Bansa, and Hausa Bagwai, 7 Hausa. From Bawa to the present king of Dauda, there are altogether 95 kings. However, in the book of Gergam, and owing to the loss of history, they became 50. In fact, 58 kings. The Fulani had 9 kings following the outside of the Habi during the jihad of Usman dan Fodio. All right, so again, the Fulani took over the Hausa states in the 1800s. All right, so I just want to read that because I thought it was pretty interesting. So remember, what did we learn? So not only did the male line, right, is coming from Baghdad, Iraq, but on the female line, her people were coming from Palestine. All right? Again, all these people are in Nigeria. We continue, it says here, memorializing a legendary figure, Bayajidda, the Prince of Baghdad, in Hausa land. This is from Abubakar Aliyu Liman from the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, Nigeria. In Hausa cultural formation, different modes of cultural signifying practices such as performing arts and oral narratives have variously drawn their ingredients from the Bayajidda legend. In a number of instances, the performing artists have ideologically turned the Bayajidda legend into a veritable frame of reference of the essence and existence of Hausa people. Ironically, the same story of a legend is also used to trace the genealogy of the so-called Fulani aristocracy, all right? They came later, and yeah, they did kind of appropriate the Hausa's states and stories, which ended the ancient Habe dynasty established by the descendants of Bayajidda. The legend is also deployed for different reconstructions of Hausa being an identity in northern Nigeria. The Hausa world has passed through different historical epochs that have seen varying social-cultural transformations over the eons. With hindsight, it now appears that every historical period in the society has alluded to or appropriated the Bayajidda legend. Every period of historical society in this region, guys, is more than a legend. For various political and ideological reasons, it has become very clear that the narrative of the legendary Hausa figure was indeed deployed to serve complex socio-political agendas and cultural dynamics. In the process, the collective identity of the Hausa people is consistently renegotiated or reconstructed. Disciplinary enclaves as diverse as history, literature, anthropology, and museology have in one way or another highlighted the Bayajidda legend in their own modes of discourse. The Bayajidda legend The narrative of the Bayajidda legend and House of Folklore indicates that the origin of the Hausa kingdoms is always associated with the story of a prince of Baghdad, Abu Jasid or Bayajidda, who migrated from his distant homeland in the Middle East to Hausa land in northern Nigeria. Bayajidda's journey took him westward as he crisscrossed different empires and cultures to reach Hausa land in the West Africa, where he pioneered the genealogies of Habi dynasty of the ancient Hausa kingdom. All right, so again, just in case I didn't mention it, again, as the legend would have it, when Bayajidda arrived on Hausa land, he was said to have taken a female queen, the matriarch of Dara. Right, remember her people anciently were coming from Palestine now. Now we know. We're gonna have a future video on that most likely. In historical accounts, Dara is believed to be the spiritual home of the ancient Hausa kingdoms. Daurama, clearly driven from the word Daura, is the name of the queen who at that material time was the sovereign monarch of Daura. Alright, she was the ruler, one of the leading Hausa city-states, if not the most important ancient spiritual hub of the Hausa people. According to the folkloric version of the Bayajidda story, Daurama became the queen of the most important centers of Hausa civilization. While still as an unmarried princess, she remained unmarried until the arrival of the brave and charming prince all the way from Baghdad in Arabia. Queen Daurama was persuaded to marry Bayajidda basically on account of his bravery and good looks. How did this happen? At the point of his entry into the city of Dara, on the outskirts of the city of Bayajidda, knocked at the door of an old woman named Ayana. All right, we just got this, right? Who, in the spirit of traditional Hausa hospitality, accepted to the host him and his entourage as guests in her home. Bayajidda was thirsty and exhausted, so she asked the old woman for water to quench his thirst. All right, so we know the story, right? She sent him to the well. Bayajidda's marriage to Queen Daurama was preceded by dramatic events in which he demonstrated his courage by killing the mysterious serpent known as Sarki. The serpent had prevented people from fetching water from Kasugu, the only well in town except on Friday. So we got the whole story already, that's what they went over. Memory and representation. The narrative of the Bayajidda legend above is abstracted from its various renditions ranging from oral sources, all right, very old chronicles, guys, legendary, official palace documents and oral stories, right? Musical songs, museum artifacts, all right, artifacts and films. Although the narrative of a legendary Hausa figure is deeply entrenched in the folklore of the Hausa people, right? Deeply entrenched as more than a legend. Its retention in the memory of individuals and in different chronicles regarding the origin of ancient Hausa states has occurred for different ideological purposes. However, the subsequent analysis will show that the narrative has meant different things to different people in different historical periods. With the evolution of Hausa society from the ancient period to the present, the need for cultural preservation through the reenactment of the Bayajidda legend is necessary for the reconstruction and revalidation of what has come to be known as common house identity within the social political dynamics of post-colonial Nigeria. All right, their identity. This is achieved through the reintroduction of pristine identities of pre-colonial Nigerian communities using available media. Historians of the Central Sudan, such as Abdullah Smith, have questioned the rationale and authenticity of the Bayajidda narrative in historical reconstructions, but somehow they concur that the legend has at least served as an important means of legitimation and identity construction in the cause of state formation. All right, so listen. For them to accept this, they would have to go out of Africa theories, because then they would have to try to see, okay, so when did these people leave Africa and what part of Africa were they from before they went to Baghdad, right? Because remember, everybody's supposed to be coming out of Africa, so they can't explain that. But literally, guys, what this is proving and showing is that they are coming into Africa. They were from Asia. They were from that area, region of the world. Historians, colonial historians most especially, have variously analyzed the Bayajidda legend. H.R. Palmer in the Sudanese Memoirs, a collection of Arabic manuscripts, local chronicles, Arab and European travelogues, has made a detailed translation of the histories of the people occupying the territories of central and western Sudan. The British colonial accounts of the entire history of Dara seem to have been sourced from documents that were largely written in Arabic. On the specific issue of Bayajidda, Palmer relied on a written document called the Gurgam. The Gurgam Chronicle was believed to be an orally based document which is largely rewritten from memory. So Hodgkin and M.G. Smith has confirmed the written sources of the Bayajidda story. He collected two written narratives that recounted the Bayajidda episodes from the leading Islamic clergy of Dara. Okay? The leading Limamin Daura Malam Ishaka. The document recorded how Abu Yasidu, as Hausa folk singers called Bayajidda, the son of Abdullahi, the king of Baghdad, had a misunderstanding with his father and the people of his hometown. As a result, he left home and embarked on a journey to Black Africa. So-called black. They were so-called black. And M.G. Smith, Queen Darama's origin was traced to the east. Direct Lange has even described her as the Canaanite queen of Dara. So that's who we were just reading, Direct Lange, I think, in the last book, in the last source we were just reading coming from. So he described her as the Canaanite queen of Dara. She is said to be the youngest daughter of one Abduldar, the son of Najib the Canaanite. Talking about ancient Philistines. Najib set out from Canaan to settle in Libya. Later, his son Abduldar moved southward across the Sahara to a place called Kusugu in Hausa land. Kusugu is, of course, the name of the well in Darda, where a notorious serpent prevented people from drawing water on some designated days. The title adopted by matrilineal rulers of Darda is Maga Jiva. There were, in fact, about 17 Maga Jivas, queens in Darda, before the establishment of a completely patrilineal Habe dynasty with the rule established by the descendants of Bayajidda. All right, so we got that. It was matriarchal before, and then he came and they switched it up, right? All right, a legendary figure. This was from Africa Focus, volume 32, all right, from Ahmadu Bello University of Zaria, Nigeria. All right, so now we're going to read from this for the dismount, getting close to the dismount here. It's from the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland from January to June 1908, volume 38, pages 58 to 98. It's the Kano Chronicle, Kano people's origin story, chronicles, official. The Kano Chronicle, translated with an introduction by H.R. Palmer. It says here, the Hausa states, which form a large portion of the country now called northern Nigeria, have been ruled since the beginning of the 19th century by Fulani, who under their chief Othman Dan Hodio about the year 1807 ousted the former Hausa rulers on the plea of a religious revival. They did a jihad, a holy war on them. So, as is what I was saying, this happened in the 1800s. The Fulani kind of took over the Hausa states and their kind of stories too. As it was known that Arabic literature and the Muslim faith had been introduced in the 15th century at latest, it was natural to suppose that some records had been kept of the reigns of the Hausa kings, Sarkis. Little, however, has hitherto come to light except for two manuscripts which Dr. Bob discovered in Bornu, dealing with that country, and the Kano Chronicle, of which there are several copies in existence, and which is mentioned by Lady Lugard, Tropical Dependency, page 236. The copy, however, to which Lady Lugard alludes is not complete, since only 42 kings are mentioned. The manuscript which I have attempted to translate below was found at Sambongari near Katsina, and goes down to and breaks off in the time of Mohammed Bello, the 48th king. The manuscript itself is of no great age and must, on internal evidence, have been written during the latter part of the decade 1883, but it probably represents some earlier record which has now perished. It is said, and no doubt with some truth, that the Fulani and their fanatical zeal destroyed many old records and books. You guys hear that? On the ground that they were the books of Kafurai, for their casus belli was that the house of Sarkis were infidels, and as such deserved to be destroyed with all their works. The records of which the chronicle must be based were apparently an exception, and authorship is unknown, and it is very difficult to make a guess. On the one hand, the general style of the composition is quite unlike the usual note struck by the sons of Dan Hodio, Abdullahi, and Mohammed Bello, and imitated by other Fulani writers. A little further down says here, the countries between Ghana and Borno are not mentioned by El Bekri or Edrisi. It is not until the time of Leo Africanus that Kano and Katsina were important enough to be known to the outside world. But between AD 900 and AD 1513, the date of Leo's visit to the Sudan, that's a lot of years, Certain peoples represented in the text by Bayajidda arrived at Dara and conquered the indigenous inhabitants of the Hausa states. So they didn't really conquer, right? You guys, we just read the whole story, right? So the native tradition as to who they were varies. The Fulani Sarke Muslim Muhammad Bello says that they were the slaves of the Sultan of Bornu. But this statement is made of the authority of Muhammad el-Bakri, a Kanuri. The well-known Dara legend, preserved in writing, says they came from Baghdad and introduced the horse into Hausa land. Bayajidda, ancestor of the kings of Hausa land, all right? They didn't have horses there. Come on, guys, look. When the horse was introduced there, they didn't have horses there. Horses are from America. Come on now. So, Bayajidda, the ancestor of the kings of Hausa land, mentioned in the footnote, page 64, is represented as having arrived in Dara, slain a snake which inhabited a well, and married the queen of Dara. He had previously escaped from the treachery of the Sultan of Bornu, who, having tampered successfully with the loyalty of his men, was plotting against his life when he fled. The story will make Bagoda and his men Hamites. Other Malams maintain that the invading people were Tetere Tartars. M. Desplagnis has a theory that Mongols formed an element in the tribes which overthrew Ghana. About AD 1230. It is possible that a western migration of peoples of mixed origin account for the two stories, and that the same causes which presumably led to an advance in civilization in Kanu degraded the Libyo-Berber civilization of Ghana. The only certain fact, however, is that about AD 1000, the Hausa states were occupied by an alien race, all right, immigrants coming from the East, all right, the Middle East. This race or people ruled through at different periods tributary to Songhai and Borno until displaced by the Fulani in 1807, right? This is the Hausa people coming from Baghdad. And again, Dauda, they're people coming from Palestine, yeah, from the East. It is they who are often called Habi, a word of which the singular is Kadao. The name does, as well as any other, express this people, but it by no means follows the people of the Hombori region, west of the Niger, called Habi by the Fulani, are connected with them. For the Fulani called any conquered Negro people Habi. Alright, you hear that? For this reason, it seems better to keep the word Hausa to express the post AD 1000 and pre-1807 inhabitants of Hausa land, provided that it is not used indiscriminately of any peoples who speak the Hausa language. In fact, Habi is a far wider word than Hausawa, and practically means any Negro race. The primitive peoples of the Hombori and the Dala stock of Kano may both be conveniently called Habi. The name in itself proves nothing. Now the clans from the east which laid waste the kingdoms west of the Niger during the 12th century were of the eponym serpent. Alright, listen to this. This is the snake that if they're slain, there was a people. Alright, so again, now the clans from the east which laid waste the kingdoms west of the Niger during the 12th century were of the eponym serpent. They become in various places Susu, Sarakole, Sauke, Sisoko. Look at that, Sok, Su, Toko, Su. We find that in 1346, 1349, an early sultan of Borno fights the Sao, or So, the original inhabitants of the greater part of the country between Wau and Shari. The Kano chronicler expressly states that the Emir Abdullahi Burja, who ruled about AD 1438, was the first house of Sarki to pay tribute to Bornu, while in 1421 it has been mentioned a chief who very probably was Othman Kalnama, fled to Kano when a revolt expelled him from Bornu. We find, therefore, that when the Borno princes began to extend their empire west of Chad, about 1346, they were opposed by a people called Sao, whom they had apparently been fighting for years. That a snake-killing hero, listen, is supposed to have founded the so-called Hausa dynasties, that about 1200, there was a great conquest by Sa, serpent clans, alright, west of the Niger. Serpent clans, huh? And finally, that after the sultans of Borno became paramount over Hausa about AD 1438, there is no more mention of So or Sao. Alright? And this is your snake he killed. So it was metaphorical, but it did happen. He did come from Baghdad. He didn't just kill the snake, he took over a whole people. He got rid of a people that were, I guess, keeping the Dauda people or Dauda and her people from drinking water and controlling them, right? The plural of Kadu is Habe. Possibly the plural of Sa or Sao is Hausa or Sao Sao. Right? You see that Sao? It's in the Hausa. It is also curious that west of the Niger, these Soso or serpent clans are represented as bringing the horse with them. Okay, the horse, as in the Dauda legend. It may also be added that some form of serpent is the totem of nearly every non-Muslim Hausa community at the present day. But whatever the origin of the invaders, they founded the Hausa Bokoi, or seven Hausa states, and continued to rule all except Goldberg, where the reigning families are said to be of Coptic origin. All right, Palestine. If we may trust the chronicle, the primitive Kanu people had already advanced fairly well in arts and trades before the advent of the invaders. The conqueror's religion seems by implication to have been Mohammedan, and their chiefs are represented as present pagan observances, a story which is difficult to believe. But in any case, they soon lapse into the same practices as their subjects, and the Wongarawa are later on credited with introducing Islam. So the chronicle's pretty long. This is the actual translation. It says here the Kano Chronicle. And what I learn and what I see is that before the people from Baghdad and their progenitors settled this area, there was local people there, and this is what they start talking about. And it says Barbuche, once its chief, was of the stock of Dala, a black man of great stature and might, a hunter who slew elephants with his stick and carried them on his head about 9 miles. Dala was of unknown race. All right, they don't know, possibly Hamite, but came to this land and built house on Dala Hill. They also came into this land, though they weren't indigenous. There he lived, he and his wife. He had 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls, of whom the eldest was Garaheje. This Garaheje was the grandfather of Busame, who was the father of Barbuche. Barbuche succeeded his forefathers in the knowledge of the lore of Dala, for he was skilled in the various pagan rites. By his wonders and sorceries and the power he gained over his brethren, he became chief and lord over them. Among the lesser chiefs with him were Gunsago, whose house was at the foot of Gorgondutse to the east. After him came Gagiwa, father Rubu, who was so strong that he caught elephants with rope. All right, these giants, what are we talking about here, huh? Hamites, possibly? So what I want to point out is that these people were there before the Baghdad people came, before Dauda married Bayajidda, and they had kids who eventually became progenitors in these towns as well. They took over these places. And later on in the chronicle, it talks about the legend that it was a prophecy that, hey, somebody's coming to take your land, your tree, your hill, all that. So it says, a man shall come, said he, to this land with an army and gain the mystery over us. They answered, why do you say this? It is an evil saying. Barbeshu held his peace. And Suf, said he, you will see him in the sacred place of Chumburai. If he comes not in your time, surely he will come in the time of your children, and will conquer all in this country, and forget you and yours, and exalt himself and his people for years to come. Then were they exceeding cast down. They knew well that he did not lie. So they believed him and said, what can we do to avert this great calamity? He replied, there is no cure but resignation. They resigned themselves, but the people were still grieving over this loss of dominion at some distant time, when Bagoda, all right, now, this is of the line of Dauda and Bayajidda, right, as their descendant, a generation later, came with his host to Kano. They took over this area. There is a dispute, however. Some deny this and say that it was Bagoda's grandson who first reached Kano, and that he and his son died at Skim. He, at all events, entered Kano territory first. When he came, he found none of Barbucha's men, save Jambere, Ambaru, and Gersangri, Jandanimisa, and Kamfatau. These said, is this man he of whom Barbuchu told us? Jambere said, I swear by Chuburai, if you allow these people within our land, verily they will rule you, till you are of no account. The people refused to hearken to the words of Jambere and allowed the strangers to enter the country, saying, where will Bagoda find strength to conquer us? So Bagoda and his host settled in Gasar Sawa, remember that? That was the original name, and built houses there. After 7 months, they moved to Skim. The district from Jakarta to Damargu was called Gasar Sawa. From Jakarta to Santolo was called Sadawa. From Santolo to Burku was called Fongi. From Banfai to Wasai was called Saura. From Wateri to the rock of Karia was called Dunsuru. From Santolo to Shike, Shirija. From Damargu to Kasaure, Shim, or Shem. From Burku to Kara, Gaude. From Kara to Amugu, Gija. From Karmeshi to Ringen, Pokawa. Now the chiefs whom Bagoda found holding sway over this land acknowledged no supreme lord save Tumburburai and Grove of Jakarta. Jakarta was called Kurming Bakem Rua because its water was black and it was surrounded by the grove. So again, who is Bagoda? The people who came to this land, the land of Kano. It says Bagoda down here in the Funa, he was the son of Bawo. Remember, Bawo was the son of Bayajidda and Dauda. They're saying a stock of ham coming from Baghdad. And Dauda's people were coming from Palestine before that. So it was by reason of his high lineage that Bawo conquered all Hausa land. He and his 6 sons, the first of them was Kasura, then came Bagoda, right? Bagoda ended up in Kano, right? So this is how the Kano chronicles links up to the Bayajidda story and lineage. You guys understand? Ubandoma, that's another son, Gamgama, Kurimeo, and Kasanki. When Bawo died, Kasura became emir of Dauda. Bagoda went to Kano, Abandoma to Kobir, Gangama to Saksak, Kumao to Kachina, and Kasanki to Kur or Nero. This is a reliable account in a book of the names of emirs of Kano. Alright, this is a reliable account, guys. They mentioned the Bayajidda, so they know. So it wasn't like a prophecy. They probably knew that the house of Bayajidda was spreading, and they eventually would come and take their land. So that's why they just decided not to fight. So it seems like they, destroyed their stuff, their temples and their hill. They were worshiping something there. So down further it says Bagoda, son of Bawo. Then came Bagoda with his host and was the first Sarki of this land. His name was Daud. His mother's name was Kaudnasu. He began by occupying Dirani for 2 years. Thence he moved to Barca and built a city called Talutawa, where he reigned for 2 years. And then it was Warisi, son of Bagoda, and so the lineage continues, right? And here's the whole story. And this is again the Kano Chronicle. And they have this recorded, the genealogy, the ancestry, the whole story, the whole chronicle. Guys, this is official. This is official. Make sure if you want to read the whole thing, go ahead and find it. I mean, it's free. You can find it on JSTOR. All right. Again, this was the Kano Chronicle, the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland, from 1908. So, guys, I think I'm gonna end it here right now. That was a lot of information. I hope you guys enjoyed the research and the anthropology on these African groups and peoples and their true origins. I hope you guys understand how important and big this is, how history needs to be rewritten and the true origins of people really acknowledged. I got so many videos coming on the people of Africa and Asia, guys. We're just getting started, and I'm gonna give you a little preview of one of the upcoming videos, because literally we're just opening up Pandora's box here, and you're gonna see it's not just the Hausa or the Kanem-Borno people or the Shona. There's a lot more people in Africa that came from somewhere else. As it says here in this article, real quick, guys, it says the founding of Kanem by Assyrian refugees circa 600 BC, documentary linguistics and archaeological evidence by Dirk Lange, working papers on African Studies Center, Boston University. All right, so again, this is just a little preview. I'm gonna read something real quick. So before I do that, right, Assyrian refugees, says here in Wikipedia, Neo-Assyrian Empire. I just want you guys to see the map. That's where Iraq, Iran, so-called Persia is today. Same place with the Hausa and a lot of these African peoples are coming from. So just to know that others have already done the research and realized who these people really are in history. It's amazing. And again, he tells us right here, going into the article, scholars have neglected the local written linguistic and anthropological data in the central Sudan and have concentrated on the more eventful history of the Western Sudan. All right? He's telling you they're not listening to the people. They're disregarding the anthropology, the written records of their own ancestors. And they want to add their out of Africa theories. But as he says right here, all dynastic traditions of Kanem-Borno, whether written or oral, place the origin of the ruling Sefuwa dynasty in the Near East, either in Yemen or in Baghdad. All dynastic traditions, okay? I'm also going to add this to that video. An Assyrian successor state in West Africa, the ancestral kings of Kebi, as ancient Near Eastern rulers. This is in the journal Anthropos, is the International Journal of Anthropology and Linguistics, founded in 1906 by Wilhelm Schmidt. The title of the journal stands for the Greek word for human being and expresses its main purpose, namely the study of human societies and their cultural dimension. All right? Again, an Assyrian successor state in West Africa. Who are the ancestral kings of Kebi? They were ancient Near Eastern rulers. And not just any rulers, but famous ones that we know of. Real quick, just reading the abstract here. On the basis of newly discovered documents in the Hausa state of Kebi, Nigeria, the present article argues that the foundation of the state was the result of a conquest by Assyrian immigrants towards 600 BC. All the major sources of the history of the state support this theory. A chronicle derives the origin of the Kabawa from Matayana, a name probably referring to Ashur, and Nineveh. The Kanta tradition postulates an immigration of the state-building ancestors from Arabia. The long king list has 33 names of kings which can be shown to have ruled in the ancient Near East, and the short king list concentrates on Kebi and omits nearly all the non-African kings. From the names included in the long kings list, it appears that early kings of the Kabawa were ancient Near Eastern rulers, and that the author of the list believed in the continuity between Assyria and Kebi. In chronological order, the names refer to Akkadian Amorite and to the Neo-Assyrian period. All right? Again, Neo-Assyrian Empire. Again, where is that? Iraq. And the Hausa coming from there? The departure of the Assyrian refugees from Syria, Palestine is referred to by the name of the Babylonian conqueror of Assyria and the name of the last Assyrian king. Okay? All right. That's where we're going to leave it here for the dismount to be continued. That's what we got coming, that and a lot more. We got more studies on other African peoples. We're going to get into all of them, guys, as many as we can, and learn the true history. Break the spell, empty your cup, stop practicing cognitive dissonance, listen to the local people, they know who they are, and stop adding false narratives to history. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to hear me out and watch the whole presentation. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.